right, good afternoon.
want to clean it.
Today we are so happy to have historic fashion maven Karen Antonowicz.
Wow, good job.
And she will take visitors on a journey through the fashion history of the nation's First Ladies in her presentation today, Fashion and the First Lady. This event is part of NH250, an ongoing series of programming developed by the New Haven Museum to complement America 250. Culminating with the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the series will highlight inclusive, local, and lesser-known stories connecting past and present. Now here's my little plug. We here at the New Haven Museum want to continue to offer these programs for free, so we ask you to keep supporting us. As you leave today, there is a donation box on the table, as well as a QR code to our website, where you can find our PayPal link. Now, onto our program. From Martha Washington through to the 21st century, Antonowicz will offer a fascinating survey of some of the most iconic First Ladies' fashions. Using slides and video clips and clothing and accessories from her personal collection, she will share her knowledge of the wives of American presidents through the centuries. From the very beginning, she says, First Ladies have been watched, admired, copied, and sometimes criticized for their style. Ren received her master's degree in textiles, fashion merchandising, and design with a concentration in historic costume and textiles from the University of Rhode Island. She taught history of fashion and other courses at the college level for 13 years and in the CE program at the Rhode Island School of Design. She operated Nostalgic Antiques and Collectibles, a 3-floor co-op in Providence, Rhode Island, for 5 years. She continues to follow her passion for historic costume by conducting fashion era presentations, such as Cocktail Culture, the Mad Men Era, at libraries, senior centers, schools, historic societies, and historic homes. Her current endeavor, Spirits of Fashion, offers lectures, workshops on all eras of fashion history and styling, and is based in Chester, Vermont. Welcome, Ren.
Thank you so much. If you can't hear me, or if I'm too loud, just raise your hand and I'll be happy to change it. I have a very loud voice, so I have to be very aware of that when I have a mic. Otherwise, you're going to think you're at a rock concert, and not in a good way. So, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here. As Cindy had she mentioned, I'm from Vermont. I'm originally from Rhode Island, but we moved to Vermont almost 6 years ago. So you've already heard the story, so I won't give you the details of that. But I've been doing this particular wonderful type of work since 2012 when I was asked to do something just like this for the anniversary of the Titanic. And that was in Attleboro, Massachusetts. And I did the same thing. I had a slideshow. I had whatever I had from the period, which of course was 1912, and right around that period. And that's how I knew that this was my audience. You're my audience because you get it. You're here because you want to hear about the past. Some people love to look back at the past. Some people just enjoy the history and the fashion is just okay. But people come for all reasons, and that's fine with me. I just did a little side note. Not that I don't know if any of you are thinking of going or want to go or even know about it, but in April there is a weekend event in my favorite place in the world, which is Salem, Massachusetts. That's another story for another day. My parents and I, they passed a while ago, and my sisters and myself go every October and stay 2 nights in the Hawthorne Hotel, which is my second home. And then now I have a friend up north who goes with me in May. But in addition to that, we're spoiling ourselves like crazy this year. They have a Titanic weekend where you get to go to a masquerade ball, and there's an 8-course tasting meal from the menu from the Titanic and other things. So I'm just mentioning it in case you have any interest in that. And if you do go, you see me there, be sure to say hi. It just sounds like a great time. Anyway, before I get started on our First Ladies, I almost always forget to tell you what I'm wearing, and then I get asked, well, what are you wearing? Well, today I went a little bit, usually I dress either, if it's a late enough piece of clothing that's not fragile, I will wear that if it's appropriate for the period. But in this case, I'm wearing an 80s suit that sort of looks 40s because of the shoulder pads, but is not. And the hat's from the 50s, and we'll talk more about hats in a little while. And the shoes are more modern. They're Italian. I got them thrifting, and I just love the way they looked. So that's what I'm wearing, and I do mix it up like that sometimes. The blouse is 80s as well. The Villager blouses, if you remember that name, again got it secondhand. But I love dressing up, and I live in mud season Vermont right now, and it's very difficult to walk around with anything but hiking boots because you're going to be loaded with mud. So you don't want to wear really nice shoes at this time of year. But anyway, that's why I enjoy doing these. I get to dress up.
Could you tell us about the button on your
Oh, yes, it came this way.
Really?
Yes, and since then, I've lost a stone. I just noticed that a couple days ago. Yes, it came this way. I don't know if someone who owned it prior to me put it on there, but there's a belt that goes with it, but I won't wear it because it covers the button. And the button is the thing that pops and that's special. So thanks for asking about that. Okay, let's talk about our first ladies. Whoops, did I do that? I can't be trusted with this thing. All right, I'm going to stand to the side so you can all see. You can hear me, right?
Oh, yeah, perfectly.
I had to have two things. Little cheat notes because it's impossible to remember every single detail about the ladies I'll talk about. So little cheat sheets. But I had to pick just some because we'd be here till midnight if I tried to do all of them. I tried to pick either those that are really kind of considered icons of fashion, right? And you can probably think of at least a couple of those now. And some who were not so known for fashion, but they were known for other things. So that's how I picked. So let's do this. Now, you're going to see the first slide change, which I'm sure you already did, but just to get an idea of the beginning of our presidency here in the country, we're going to go from this to this. Okay? So let me go back again. This is court fashion from the 1700s. And then once the French Revolution happened, now we're looking at a completely different set of fashion rules. And initially, in the 1790s, if you look at the top, middle, and then the two sides, that's around 1790. And it looks like almost a bustle in the back. That was, sometimes there was something called a bum roll, which was something that went around the waist, a padding around the waist that made the butt look a little bit rounder and stand out a little more. And then in the front, there is a lower neckline, but with this bouffant kind of scarf situation in the front, which was a modesty piece, but also very decorative. And then after the French Revolution, you end up with what it looks like down on the bottom there, which was a completely different fashion altogether. It was now the Empire period, it would become the Empire period, so the Empire waist would be popular. And because of the French Revolution, they're looking back towards the Romans and the Greeks because of this democratic republic need that they had. And so the women start almost to look like statues from Greece and Rome. Lots of light colors, light muslins. Of course, they did have undergarments because these things were almost see-through. They were very, very light. And so they did have to have it for modesty. So again, this is the end of the 1700s, towards the end. This is 1780 to 89, right before the Revolution. And that's what I'm talking about with the bustle kind of thing in the back. We'll see that again 100 years later. But this is what was going on then, sort of like what Marie Antoinette with her shepherdess dress and that kind of thing, that style. You'll be happy to know that hairstyle was called a la hedgehog. Since it kind of sticks out. It was different from what came before it, which was that really high hair. Think about Marie Antoinette and the Duchess of Devonshire with that really high hair. It's almost like somebody pressed it down really hard and it came out the sides. That's what it reminds me of. But that's a la hedgehog. And then here's another images of that. And you're seeing again that most of the emphasis is on the rear. But you do see some action in the chest area. So for evening, they could expose that, whereas they would have to cover that up during the day. And that brings us to Martha. So I'm going to start with her with a few facts, and then we'll go ahead and look at a couple of pictures. So she was born in 1731, died in 1802, and of course his presidency was 2 terms, 1789 to 1797. She was the daughter of Colonel John Dandridge, a planter in New Kent County, Virginia, and she was the widow of another planter, another wealthy planter named Daniel Park Custis. And so he left her a large inheritance. But the tragedy was she had 4 children with him. 2 died in childbirth, and 2 more would die older than that, into young adulthood, or just more of a child than a baby. She married George Washington in 1759, did not have any children with him. She returned to Mount Vernon, of course, after George's presidency and after John Adams was inaugurated. That's her little history right there. There she is, a younger version, and then an older version of her. And this is what I mean about the bouffant, the scarf-like feature in the front during the day, and then you could expose it a little bit more in the evening. I just love the portraiture. Just so beautifully done, and just captures the features. And so some of the first ladies we're going to look at, it's interesting because here she looks completely different in terms of her style than she does as an older woman, even though she's in the style of her period. But some of the other ladies we're going to look at look like they never changed, because the early years and the late years, they look kind of similar in terms of what they picked to wear. But we'll get into that in a bit. The next First Lady is Abigail Adams, and she's a really good example of what I just said. She's in what looks like brown velvet in the early years, and then a little bit later looks like it's the same thing. So I've got some facts about her. She is from Weymouth, Mass. I don't know if you knew that, but yeah, she was from Weymouth. She, of course, they moved in, she and John Adams moved in. They were the first tenants of the White House. Wasn't really furnished yet, so she would use the East Room, which is really the audience room, to dry her laundry. So that must have been an interesting sight. She resented the obligations of having to be a first lady and what she had to do, but she did entertain very often and formally. She refused to change her appearance for fashion's sake. No kidding. It doesn't look like she was moving along in any special way, but she was an attractive lady, especially when she was younger. So 1796 to 1800, she was with John, but they didn't move into the White House until 1800. So I think that's interesting. Gilbert Stuart wanted to paint her a portrait and wanted to paint her bareheaded. But she said, "I'm not doing that. It's undignified for a 56-year-old woman." So she kept her little cap on there, and that was it. Just a little glimpse of what was happening during this time in terms of extreme fashion. Just coming out of the Revolution, you're looking at, again, this sort of statuesque look the woman on the left is wearing, and that's a red cap of liberty. She's also wearing what looks like a cashmere shawl, which was a very big thing back then, at that time period, getting shawls from India, cashmere. And if you look at her stockings, if you can see them, she's got a design on them. It's embroidered. It's called clocking. And really, any time a man's or a woman's ankles are going to be shown, which kind of was impossible not to with the types of dresses they were wearing, but they wanted, if they're going to show it off, they're going to have it decorative. So they had this clocking as a decoration and embroidery on their ankles. And he's in all his finery. Now, not from just this image, but this is just personally my favorite period for men. There's nothing better. please, gentlemen in the audience, includes you, Pat, I think you should stop dressing with that. Think about if you've ever seen the Jane Austen-based movies, how the men are Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley. Oh, please don't get me started. I want the high collars, I want the cravat, the stocks around the neck, the little messy hairdo hanging out. Oh, please. Anyway, it's very high neck, and they were getting, even though those look like breeches from the court, they were getting away from the breeches, the fancy dress of the court system or court life and dress, and going more towards the working man's trousers. Because again, it's a democratic republic that they're looking at. And I love his hair. It's long and a little bit tousled, and I don't know, I just love that look. That's me. Okay, anytime there's an extreme fashion, you're going to see cartoons about it. And this is one of those cartoons. You can see that stiff wind can blow, and because there wasn't a whole lot of fabric and it was very light, you're going to see things you may not want to see. And in this case, that's what they're looking at. You can see the clocking on their ankles, and yeah, very decorative. The bonnets were quite big at that time period as well. So this empire waistline, even though the dresses were not all that different from one another, they could have different sleeves. So that's why I put this up here, just so you could see there was a difference in, puff sleeves, long sleeves, straight sleeves, and
Leg of mutton.
they were, leg of mutton. Not so much leg of mutton, but that's coming a little later. But what I like is that they had that variety to make individualize what they wore. Otherwise, it kind of tend to look the same. On the second from the left, that is called a round gown, and it's gathered in the back because there's so much fabric that it just sort of gathered right under the high waistline, empire waistline. Okay, what do they wear over this? Well, the one on the far left is called a pelisse, P-E-L-I-S-S-E, which is just a long coat with the same empire waist, because it needs to make sense. You don't have to have a wide coat when you have such a narrow dress, right? So the coat just matches the silhouette underneath. But look at the size of the muff she's carrying. Isn't that amazing? Everybody know what a muff is? I'm looking at my young people. Thank you. Can I just tell you a quick story? I was in a consignment shop about 2 years ago up north, and it was just myself and a really young woman. I don't know if she was still a teenager or what, doesn't matter. Oh, I was mortified, I felt so old. So it was a gentleman behind the counter, and that was it. So I look over, she's asking the gentleman, she's holding up a muff and saying, "What is this?" I wanted to melt into the floor. I remember I'm really old because she doesn't even know what it is. But I had them when I was a little girl. Like Easter, we would get the white, a pole now with the bunny fur muffs. And so I remember having them as a kid. But they've gone away for the most part. The jacket in the middle and on the woman on the right, those little short jackets, called a Spencer jacket. And it usually is a contrasting color from the dress underneath, as you can see, and it could be worn indoors or out. Now keep in mind how cold they must have been without something covering. So if you see the lady on the far right, she's also got a shawl. It looks like a good sized cashmere shawl to keep her warm and cozy. Okay, brings us to Dolly Payne Matterson, Dot Matterson. Kind of first American icon. People started to notice the fashion. There's a reason for that. She was there 1809 to 17. She loved formal entertainment, unlike Abigail. Loved it. People loved her. She used to hold these popular parties, like sort of soirees called drawing rooms, which anyone could go to if they were properly dressed. So she was quite loved. She liked daring French-style gowns and turbans that chipped away at the puritanical foundations. So you can see her turban on the right, she's still wearing it. And of course they followed Jefferson, who never decorated the White House, so she must have had a field day. In 1814, the British burned down the White House, which was not rebuilt until 1817. But what she did, as it became sort of a heroine for it, is she cut out George Washington's portrait from the frame, stuck it under her dress, and hightailed it to Virginia. So she saved the portrait of the president. So that's pretty cool. But much, much loved.
Could you tell us about the gown in the middle?
That's the inauguration gown she wore the first time, so it's still kind of a high waist. But because it's such a formal gown, it's going to have that little bit of a train too. And yeah, it looks like silk satin to me, I'm sure. I'm sure it wasn't. We didn't have any synthetics back then. It was too early. So everything was either, cotton, linen, wool, or silk. So synthetics, they just keep getting worse. But back then, you only had those
That was
choices.
Skinner satin.
The collar?
I can't. Oh, on the right. It's interesting. I don't think it's a part of the dress because you can see bare skin on her left side. So it must be a sort of just like a choker. It almost reminds me of the ruffs from Queen Elizabeth the first time, in the the 1500s, late 1500s. So it looks just like a linen choker. Yeah, interesting. But she had some high style, some high French style, so I'm sure it came from that too. Interesting woman. Now I know that Queen Victoria was not a first lady, but she really was, wasn't she? She was the lady. She was the Queen of England from 1837 until her death in 1901. And was she followed in style? Do you think? Yes.
She was?
She was. The problem was when Prince Albert died, he died fairly young, and she was just crazy about him. She never came on mourning after that, so she wore black. But mourning was the thing people were doing. They were doing wearing a lot of black. That's when jet became popular as a decoration on dresses, for jewelry. You even had mourning wreaths and jewelry made out of the deceased hair, which is morbid, but that's what they did out of respect. And I read that Victoria, even after Albert died, she would lay out his clothes on his bed every night for the next day. Isn't that sad? Anyway, but she was admired. If you ever saw the movie The Young Victoria with Emily Blunt, there's some fun fashion in there in her younger years. So I would recommend that.
She was also very close to the East Indian servant.
Yes. Yeah, Abdul?
Yes.
Yes.
Relationship, as a matter of fact, in the British art, the British Museum here, they have a bust of him. When you go to look at, because they were very, very, some people speculated that perhaps it was romantic.
Yeah, they're always going to do that.
But they also, if you go to the British Museum here, you'll see the bust of him.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's right. She must have needed a lot of comfort from people and a lot of direction and guidance. Wasn't there also there was a movie called Mrs. Brown about the gentleman, I don't remember his first name. Does anybody remember?
He was Scottish.
Yes, and he helped her too. Didn't he help her right after Albert died, I think? Helped her kind of come out of herself a little bit. Through force in the beginning in a way, but yeah. But thank you for that. I forgot about Abdul. That's very true. Okay, so just a little bit about as we move along, and I'll be picking first ladies, but we need to see how we move forward in fashion. After that empire period, and when we get into the 1820s, you're going to see the skirt start to widen, and you're going to see some decoration at the bottom of the skirt. The other thing you're going to see is this widening at the shoulder a little bit. You're seeing this emphasis going towards the shoulders. And that was a big deal in the 20s. Excuse me. And then by the late 20s, you're going to see the sleeves get bigger. So they're going to get enormous, and the skirt's going to get a little bit wider, well, quite a bit wider, and you're going to be able to see the feet and the ankles going into the romantic period. If any of you have ever danced, I did ballet for years. the ballet period. You think about dances like Taglioni and some of the big stars from then, and they had these tutus that were sort of that length, and even what they're wearing, these slippers look like ballet slippers. So it's just a really interesting period for dress. The other thing during this period is the lady on the right, those two ladies, they're wearing the style from the period which was called a la chinoise, that big knot on the head. And if you do see young Victoria, the film, her mother, the woman who plays Victoria's mother, has that hairstyle. So it's really fun to watch. These sleeves. Now, if you've got to go out and work in any kind of manual labor or factory work, anything which eventually you're going to have factories to work in a little early, but things were starting to happen in that way. But if you had to do any work, those sleeves were totally impractical. That's why people of higher means liked them, because they could wear them. They could wear the latest styles and not worry about messing up their clothing or, the sleeves getting in the way. They were called gigot sleeves, G-I-G-O-T, but they were dubbed, this is terrible, but they were dubbed imbecile sleeves because people couldn't believe that, anybody could wear those sleeves and get anything done or do anything. I know it's awful. But look at the emphasis on the shoulders there. You can really see that in this image. I love it. This same pelisse, there's your pelisse again, just like you saw during the Empire period, but it's wider. It has to be. The skirts are wider. You can't have a big skirt and then have this slim coat over it, and it's going to be trying to bust through the seams. So definitely need a coat that's going to match it. And then it would sometimes have something called a pelerine, which would come across almost like a cape. And I love that sometimes they would tuck it, the ends of it, the tails of it, so to speak, into the belt. Very, very stylish, but again, very impractical. And then we hit the 1840s, and everything gets a little bit more somber looking. The dress length comes back down to the floor. Now the skirts are getting wider. However, to get them as wide as they're going to be when you enter into the 1850s, they had to drag around a serious amount of petticoats. So they were heavy. And they're like, oh man, this is exhausting. Can you imagine walking around all day with layers and layers of petticoats until the 1850s, around the mid-decade, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can see that no more big sleeves. You're seeing the sleeves are starting to change shape. The transition of that, let me see if I can find there's a way to point. I don't know, I don't want to, nope, oh geez, sorry, okay. Third from the left. It almost looks like that big poofy sleeve was stuck with a pin, like a balloon. And then it was pushed down here, so it's flat here, and then you've got this big sleeve. That's what I think of when I think of getting away from the 30s into the 40s. And then eventually you'll see that straight sleeve. But doesn't everything look heavier? Everything just looks heavier.
Do you know how heavy it was? Like how heavy a dress was that kind of?
I wish I could tell you for sure. I've never had anything that old to be able to lift it. But I know if it was full all wool, I know it's going to be heavy. And if it's cotton or linen, then no. But and even silks could have some weight to them, and then they're going to come out with the weighted silks, which causes problems with silk. But that's I think a little later than that. So, but yeah, I mean, you're going to see a film clip of Sally Field as Mrs. Lincoln, and she talks about how heavy the clothes she wore were. So you know there had to be some weight. Okay, this is our girl for this one. This is Julia Tyler. She married John Tyler. She married a sitting president. So he was there from 1841, obviously, to 45. She married him in 44. But what she did a few years before she married him, is she did an ad for a New York City department store, which shocked people. But they made her a celebrity overnight. And that's her in the center there, and she was with a gentleman she did not know. So, scandal. She was young. She was the youngest in the White House, but she was only 9 months there. She was billed at the Rose of Long Island. So she had a very vibrant social world. She was only 21, widely liked, and she didn't have any one fashion trend, but she was really visible, and she was young. So I'm sure people were fascinated with her. Look at her on the left, you can see the fan-like, instead of coming from here and going to the shoulders, it's starting down here and going out. So I just always think that's really cool.
Why did she make the ad? What was it?
She was young and probably, she was still a
She
teenager.
had it published in the magazine, the
Yeah.
newspaper?
Yeah, it was an ad, so it must have been one of the newspapers or a magazine. Yes, but maybe to her that was like, really a cool thing to do. She was so young and figured, maybe I'll be seen this way, or she just liked fashion or liked the store and just figured, hey, I'm going to have fun with this. It did make her a celebrity. But
And is that her wedding gown on the right?
that, I think, is her, I want to say it's her inauguration gown. But it's beautiful, isn't it? And again, of course, it's evening, so she has the open chest area because it's okay. It's after a certain time of day when they're able to expose a little bit more.
What does she have in her hand? Is that a fan?
Yeah, that's a fan, yeah. Did you know there's a whole language of fans?
Yes.
Victorian language. I don't remember much about which, I know this cheek means this cheek. The one I remember, of course I'm going to remember this one, if a woman goes like this across her neck, you're saying to the other person, drop dead. Just so you know. That's the only one I remember.
I'll get you a fan so you can use it
Okay,
in your house.
1850s, this is when things started to become a little bit easier for ladies who wanted big skirts. Now they can wear something called the cage crinoline, which was a big hoop skirt, very light, very wide, and it would change shape according to the silhouette over it, what the dress was going to look like. So it made the silhouette, but it also was accommodating the dress. And you can see the bottom of it on the right. You can see the bottom of that cage crinoline. And it's so cool because when women walk in them, almost knocked that over. When they walk in them, they sway. You can see the hoops sway. And look at that dress on the right. Can you see the waist on that? Let me toggle this for you. It's worth it. Just try to do that. And I'll get out of the way, but I want you to see.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So that's going to be all cartridge pleating around the waist. So much fabric there. Isn't that fabulous? An evening dress. Oh, nobody makes them like they used
That's
to.
amazing.
A lot of work in that.
Can you see that?
So this first lady was not married to the president. Her name was Harriet Lane Johnston. She was official hostess for her uncle, who was a confirmed bachelor. Now, when you see the first to be called first lady, this is still in debate. They don't, because Sally Field says, Mary Todd Lincoln was the first to be called first lady. I've read so many different things, and then when I put that up there, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to leave it there, but I'm not too sure about that. But 57 to 61, she was with her uncle, and the great thing is, he had been a diplomat to Britain, so she got to go to Europe and go to Victoria's court and everything. And she loved Parisian fashion. So she bought it. She bought them. And just really kind of cool. She had the privilege of entertaining the Prince of Wales, who became King Edward VII. But think about where Buchanan was and what years we're looking at. It's right before the Civil War. So there was a lot of tension going on. This is bitterly divided people at this time. And then, of course, you're going to look at the secession of the states from the Union. So he didn't come into an easy presidency. That's for sure. But that dress on the right, her inauguration gown, it doesn't look like it would fit the period, but it has a train in the back. So it's longer in the back. And at the beginning of the late 50s to the 60s, you start to see, instead of that big wide gown, you see, it's starts to flatten in the front, and you start to see length in the back. So I think that's what happened there, and then you've got the train going on too. So, oh, here's another cartoon. Obviously, in this case, the lady has such a wide skirt, her lady's maid cannot get to her in normal fashion, so has to be lying down on this sawhorse or whatever it is. And there's another one that I've seen, I think it's my favorite one. They're at an evening or a soiree, and the room is filled with women with these wide skirts. And the men want to give them refreshments, they can't get to them. So they have them on long sticks that they hand over to the ladies. They can't get through the skirts. That's another good one. I've seen several of cartoons for this. Love it. Okay. In the 50s, into the 60s, when you enter in the 50s and going into this next period, you're going to see again the flattening of the front. But during the 50s and into the 60s, you see these high necks for day wear, like with a collar, a separate collar and cuff that can be laundered. So, linen, cotton, they could wash them. And see the sleeve on the far, well, they both have them. It's called a pagoda sleeve. It's a very wide sleeve on the upper garment or on the bodice. But they would wear a washable undersleeve pinned underneath. So they could actually take that off. I know that when I was a dietitian in my first career, and we had these lab coats we had to wear, and we're always writing, and it was filthy. The white lab coats, they get all like pencil and pen marks all over them, and it was gross. So, not that these women who dress like this are doing much work. I'm just saying, you can still get dirty, so you have to have a sleeve that you can actually wash. The evening dresses, again, it's a little bit easier because you can show a little bit more whatever you got there, show it off. You'll see if we go to sleeve, I'm going to come over here again one more time and just show you a little bit more detail here. There's your go to sleeve. It's just hard to see from back there. So there you go. So that doesn't have a sleeve underneath it, but there would be a sleeve pinned. You can see the removable collar right there. So that's a typical. And then you see the length in the back of that dress. It's a good example. And in the early 60s, you see a lot of like those bands of fabric, sometimes in a geometric kind of zigzag, on the sleeves or on the panel or both, like you see there. So I think that's a cool style. And then, I don't want to end the show. Let me get under there. Oh, I see. Sorry. I wanted to show you this one. Look at that fabric. And then you can see the bottom of the hoop skirt. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic? I can't even talk about it. Just so nice. It's just too nice.
It's great when you show us the enlargements. So
Yeah, you really want to see the details. And we can't, well, I guess if you could buy couture and you bought by couture, but to me, you can't get fabrics the way they were back then. You would have to use old fabrics to be able to make things with this quality. And this is why I love, one of the many, many reasons I love, as my sister would dub it, old clothes. That's what she tells people. Oh, my sister teaches old clothes. But the old clothes were better. They were better made, and they were made to last. They weren't made to throw away after 2 wearings with the buttons popping off the first time.
Yeah, and you couldn't take them to the dry cleaners.
No dry cleaners. Nope. You got to be on your own for that one. But I love how you can see at the bottom of the hoop skirt there.
What are those two things? Oops, can you go back a second?
Yeah.
What are those two, looks like pendants or something hanging from the front?
Oh, I think those are, it's just a decorative, almost like a lapel, and it's got, wow, now that you say that, it's almost like, they're going to do an exotic dance or something. You're talking about with the little tassels? Yeah.
Channeling.
It looks just like, it's actually a tassel on each point of what looks like No, there's the lapels up there. So this is just a decorative V-shaped set of fabric, and then they put these little tassels on there. But I never really looked that closely before, so that is so funny that you mentioned that.
You gotta pay closer attention.
No, I just need you to come with me and you can start pointing those things out. But isn't that a beauty? And then the other thing is what they call a coat sleeve, which is sort of like a sleeve that looks like it's just going to be standing up even if the person's not in it. And that was popular in the 60s too. Okay, anytime there's a war, this is the Civil War, there's going to be some kind of influence on fashion, right? Always. The Garibaldi blouse was for women and children, and it was based on General Giuseppe Garibaldi's soldiers who wore these red shirts. So that was one. Now that's Peterson's magazine. It says March, I think it's 1862, yes. The other one was a Zouave jacket, which has the braiding around the trim, around the edges, and I'm sorry, that's in white, it should be in black. It was worn by Algerian soldiers the style was adopted by one of the regiments of the Civil War. So the Zouave jacket could be worn sometimes with the Garibaldi blouse under it. And there's the jacket, and there's the regiment. Okay, this is the fun part for me. My favorite period is coming up, and that's the bustle period. We're looking at what's going to happen. So the end of the 50s, you're looking at the wide skirts, and then not all of a sudden, but gradually you're going to see, as I said, the flattening of the front. The waistline's going to creep up a bit, not as high as an empire waist, but up higher than the natural waist. And then you're going to see the skirt longer in the back. And what is that setting us up for? The bustle period, as I just mentioned, which is my favorite.
Why do dresses get loaded? Weren't they like...
Yeah, well, you know what? Yes. I mean, think about the streets. They didn't have the pavement, so there's horse manure, people throwing stuff out the window. I mean, you don't know what you're stepping in. And, you know, a lot of times they put like a horsehair braid around the hem just to give it so it doesn't tear it apart. But the people who wore these fashions and, you know, and they weren't like everyday fashions like everyday people would wear who were really out there, you know, doing manual things and working. The people of this status had ladies' maids. So they would take care of, you know, maybe even hold it up for them when they were crossing the street. That way they protected the hem from getting dirty. Yeah, good question. No fun when you think about it. And that brings us to our Mary Todd. Okay, love our Mary Todd, right? I don't live too far. I live 45 minutes away from Manchester, Vermont, where the, oh my gosh, this is what happens when you get to a certain age, the name just...
Elizabeth Kelkley was her designer.
Yes, her dressmaker.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
I read that book.
She designed all of her,
Wasn't she?
all of
Yes.
Mary Todd Lincoln's clothes.
What
And she's also a good friend to her because
Yes.
she had after losing her sons, she had what we would call a nervous breakdown.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
Elizabeth Kelkley, who designed all of her clothes, was very instrumental in helping her to get through that anguish because they were calling her crazy yet.
Oh my God, that poor woman.
But it was basically a nervous breakdown.
Of course.
She had lost her son.
Yes.
2 sons, I believe.
Yes.
And so Elizabeth Kelkley, who was an African-American woman.
Yes,
And
she helped her.
She designed all of her clothes,
Mhm.
and then she was able to later open up her own design.
Yeah, and she deserved that.
Yeah.
Because she really helped this woman a lot.
Oh yeah, mentally, and she was
And-
a designer.
She designed for her.
Yes.
What a talented lady, huh?
Yeah, Elizabeth Kelkley.
Yeah, I've heard that name and I love it. I just love that whole history of her with Mary Todd. You know, this was a sad story, as we just talked about there, but she was not very well liked because she spent so much. Even when her son Willie died, she was criticized for the cost of the mourning garments that she wore. And I'm sure she probably decorated the White House extravagantly as well. And Unfortunately, she was ruined financially after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. But I will read this. She was criticized for wearing expensive clothing, but Leslie's magazine praised her for her stylish low-cut gowns. This is a quote: stylish low-cut gowns that displayed the exquisitely molded shoulders and arms of our fair Republican queen. So somebody liked her, you know. She did have beautiful clothes. She always looked fashionable, but it was a sad story indeed. And I just, with her husband and what happened, and you know what he did for the country. But anyway, we're gonna let Sally Field talk about that in a minute. But here she is again with her lovely shoulders. She did have nice shoulders. She should show them off. And there she is as a younger woman. But Robert Todd Lincoln, his home, Hildene, is what I was trying to remember. That's in Manchester. If you ever get up there, go see it. It's beautiful property too. Okay, this is you're going to be hearing Sally Field talk about her role as Mrs. Lincoln in the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis playing the president.
I believe you when you insist that amending the Constitution and abolishing slavery will end this war. And since you are sending my son into the war, what will do you if you fail to pass the amendment?
She is such a fascinating, complicated American woman, an historical figure that's very little has been examined, next to never, and so misunderstood always, and maligned always. If there had not been a miracle, there would not have been an Abraham Lincoln.
Madam President, if you please. Don't convene another subcommittee to investigate me, sir. I'm teasing. Smile, Senator Wade.
I believe I am smiling, Mrs. Lincoln.
Everyone hated her so because she refused to go upstairs and be invisible. She was the first lady. That is where that term came from. It was first directed to her, and it was not done out of affection, put it that way.
I've always taken such a lively but prosecutorial interest in my household accounts.
Or to be a woman of a certain age, which I am, to be gaining that amount of weight was rather horrifying. And every time we do a fitting and we measure my waist, we would celebrate when I had put on another 2 inches, which was so antithetical to everything I had ever been through in my life. But the costumes were just absolutely not to be believed. Of course, they weighed 40,000 pounds.
Yeah, she did a good job in that role. Good movie to see if you haven't yet seen it. Okay, that brings us to our next First Lady, who will be in one bustle period and one big old sleeve period here, which we'll talk about. This is Frances Cleveland, known as Frank, or Frankie, and she was one of the youngest First Ladies as well. She did the last part of the first term and all of the second term. She was widely copied in fashion and style. She was the most popular First Lady since Dolly Madison, and men adored her and women emulated her. So just somebody attractive to follow. So I would consider her a fashion icon of her day. And look at that inauguration dress on the right. And even the one, look at the dress she's wearing on the left. I mean, can't see the skirt, but who wouldn't wear that now? I mean, that is a timeless piece of art as far as I'm concerned. It looks like it's velvet. She was attractive, and she wore her clothing well, obviously. So women did want to emulate her. And I don't know, I love that they called her Frank. Just this feminine-looking woman, I just love that. Okay, this is my period. I think this is what I fell in love with when I first saw the movie, The Age of Innocence. So Edith Wharton's novel rendition into a movie. And the bustles were just, I think it was the later period, so it was more like the middle period or a little before that, because you could start to see the fullness move down the skirt. But that movie entranced me, and this was what, 1990, 91, around there, I think. And what I loved about it was not only the fashion, but of course how they decorated their homes, and they, excuse me, in this movie, they zoomed in on things like little accessories they used, you know, to light a cigarette or to take a pen out and what it looked like. It zoomed in on a woman's brooch or a man's, you know, top. I was entranced, and that's one of the many, many reasons why I ended up in this field. Anyway, but the first period in the 70s, the earlier 70s to mid, you're seeing this sort of waterfall shape bustle. That a lot of that was done with the fabric of the skirt, sort of like what you would do with a window treatment. You would kind of puff it up and make it look kind of cool. So you're seeing that. And then the second period, which was late 70s into the early 80s, you're seeing this, all of that being almost pushed down into the back of the skirt and behind the knees. And this cuirass bodice, which was like a very tight-looking jacket bodice, but it looks like a jacket we've seen over the years in the 20th century, too, that style. And then the bustle pops back up again in like the mid-80s into such a flat top, it looks like you could put a tray on it. You know, it was very flat. And I love that, and I have I'm going to show it to you right now. I'm going to take it, I'm going to go over there, hold on. You know what, I think it's on the next slide. It's not. No, it's not. That's not it. Anyway, I have a cape I found that I'm pretty sure it's 1880s.
Oh, wow.
Oh, this is, look at this. Oh, sure.
Cool.
I found this in an antique store years ago.
Very pretty.
And isn't that beautiful? Can you see the colors?
Oh, look at the back.
See how it has the bustle?
Yes.
See? So that would sit over the skirt with the bustle. I have not worn it. I've tried it on. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'm so afraid if I do, I'm going to if the silk is heavy and beautiful.
Oh, see the lining. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
look at that lining.
Look at the
I could wear it for an event. I wouldn't hurt it. But to wear it a lot, I wouldn't. But it's pretty sturdy. These things weren't flimsy. You know, they were made really well. But definitely, now, when I was in grad school, we couldn't touch things from the collection without white gloves because of the oils. But these aren't going to a museum. I keep these lovingly. I take very good care of them. But you have to be able to, because they're not going to a museum. I know we're in a museum, but they're not going to be put behind, glass or anything. So I want you to be able to touch the silk because you can't feel this stuff.
This is all
anymore.
hand stitched, the
Yeah,
lining.
yeah, all hand done.
It's gorgeous.
Isn't it beautiful? So, and all of these fringe, I've seen images.
Long
of
hanging.
these.
Is that just a long, or is that a...
Oh, that's a Petersham. That's what ties around the waist.
Right.
You know what you have inside your bathrobes if you still wear them?
Yes.
Petersham. Yep. That's what that is. So you can come up and check this out, but I had to show you that while we're talking about this period. Absolutely stunning. Okay. It's the wrong period for it, but I feel like I want to wear it to the Titanic weekend, but it's not the right period. Okay, and now we're going back to sleeves. We're going into the 20th century. We'll move a little quicker by then. But, okay, that's a leg of mutton sleeve. That is a big old leg of lamb when you're looking at that sleeve. And so it's not like the Gigot sleeves of the 1830s. And the skirt isn't either. You've got the hourglass figure back, is what you're looking at there. And I love it. Now, at the same time, sports was becoming bigger for ladies as well as men. Bicycling was all the rage. Some women were going to college, more women. Some women went out to work. So they needed some practical garments. And one of those, maybe for travel, would have been what they call a tailor-made suit. Women liked men's tailoring. And they wanted that quality for their own and that look and comfort in their own clothing. And so they would have tailor-mades made for them, but you can still see they have the fashionable sleeves. Even if they wore the bloomer costume, which was from the mid-1850s with Amelia Bloomer, that never really took off, but became more popular for things like sports and gym class, what they called it back then. It's not phys ed, I don't think. But that's the leg button sleeve. And then they needed something for school and work or whatever they were doing, and that's the shirtwaist. The shirtwaist is a type of what we think of as a blouse, but it was like a man's shirt, but often with feminine details. So unfortunately, I'm sure you've heard of this, but the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory that burned down because the women were trapped inside. The doors were locked from the outside. But that factory was all about making these shirts for women. Pretty bad, I know. Okay, quickly I'll go through. I don't want to keep you here till midnight. But this is the turn of the 20th century. Now, Queen Victoria died in 1901. And King Edward came to the throne, and now it's going to be called the Edwardian period. In 1910 is when he died, but before that, things are going to change in shape, like around 1908. This is the S-bend, where the rear end is, the corset kind of forces the rear end back and the breast forward. And what they call that front is, and I have a dress and a bodice that I'll show you that is from this period, but it's called a pigeon front because it looks like a bird breast because it's longer and puffy in the front and shorter in the back. It's also called a monobosom because it looks like one big boob. It does, not to be, but it does. But it's funny when you look at the drawings, it's always going to look more extreme than what women actually wore. You'll see that in a minute. So see that on the left, it looks like some schoolgirls, maybe with the teacher, and they have that puffy front, but it's not as extreme as what we see when we see the drawings of it. I've never worn one of these corsets, but I met a woman who does reenactments, and she does interpreter kind of things, and she said it's not as uncomfortable as you think. So I'm sure she's in a reproduction corset from the period. So it's interesting when you look at it, because when I do that for a second, it hurts. So don't try it. but the woman on the right, I love that. The shirtwaist with the wool skirt. Just beautiful. Beautiful. And this was the Gibson girl period, when Charles David Gibson was doing those illustrations. So the women with the high bouffant hairdo, the pompadour kind of thing, I had to buy a wig. I know from Amazon. I don't like to get, but I had to because I don't have enough hair for that. And even though the Titanic, we were kind of past that Gibson girl, there was still a lot of hair used during that time, and I don't have enough of it, so I ordered a bright red wig. So this is going to be rich. Couldn't help it. Okay, that brings us to, one of my favorites, Alice Roosevelt Longworth, who was Teddy Roosevelt's daughter. And she would sometimes fill in at the White House. That's why I have her up here. She was rebellious as all get out. Look at that little picture of her. She took no prisoners. I love it. And she dressed the way she wanted to. Sort of like Sybil from Downton Abbey, if you remember how she was sort of a suffragette. And she dressed in what had to be Paul Poiret's harem pant look there. But anyway, so 1901 to 1909, she was around. And she shocked society later in life when she was criticized by the media. She said, and I quote, "The trouble with reporters is that they expect me to wear a halo and I only wear a hat." I love her already. So again, she often filled in at the White House. She died at 96. Her fame continued long after her dad's office ended in 1908. She wore the latest European fashions, including Poiret's hobble skirt. This was a designer who was very avant-garde in his fashion. And so the hobble skirt was something that was so narrow at the bottom you couldn't take big steps. It's like you hobbled. And then she shocked Washington by wearing a ball gown that was short enough to provide a glimpse of her slippers and ankles. And wore Oriental-style pajamas in public. She was really ahead of her time, and I love it about her. Now, you see that dress she's wearing on the far right? That's an Edwardian pigeon front. This was a wedding dress. Do you see what I'm talking about? So you've got that pouch, and it's in the back. can't see because it's got this veil, but it is shorter in the back. But I'm going to show you with this bodice over here. So hang in. I'm going to put this down. Look at this beautiful Edwardian bodice. It's all silk with velvet cuff and lace, and then this beautiful tea stain or blonde lace at the top. And then again, the collar has the velvet with the lace peeking out. And this is again the Friedrichshain. You come around the front. It has all these tiny little, this is a hook and eye situation here, but it's got decorative buttons that look like brass buttons. But here's your back. You see how the back is? I know it's hard with just one hand trying to do this, but it's shorter in the back. And then if I were to hold it like this, now you've got that front that puffs out. So you can come up and see that. Isn't that gorgeous? I got this, among others, from a woman I met when we had our store in Providence. She had her whole family's collection in her house. So all heiress. And I bought some pieces. I didn't buy everything, but this was one of them. Isn't that gorgeous? Everything matters, you know.
It's over here so we can look at it.
Oh, sure. It's catching on this thing here. Okay. That's why I don't buy expensive cloths for the tables. There we go. Yeah, you can go ahead and hold that. Yeah, of course. What did I do with my mic? This happens to me all the time. Here it is. All right. Here she is at an older age. Still looks pretty feisty to me.
Yes.
And a younger Alice. Still, I can still see the attitude, can't you? Okay, real quick. Paul Poiret's hobble skirt style right there. If you saw the movie Titanic with Kate Winslet and that gang there, you know that the waist had come up a little bit again, more closer to an empire. And so you're seeing that style come back, and a narrower skirt, very straight line. And the corset that they needed for that was pretty drastic and didn't just cinch in the waist, but covered the hips and part of the thighs, because you had to if you were going to have that very slim line. 1920s, we're looking at, of course, women having shorter skirts and a much wider silhouette, freeing the body much more. Doesn't mean women didn't wear corsets, but they didn't have the drastic corsetry that they had. And some women, the younger women, flappers, if you want to call them that, but they had step-ins, which was like just sort of what we think of as a camisole and a set of
Don't trip.
not drawers, but what are they called? Something. I know this is the last year. I can't get the words to come anymore, and I know it like the back of my hand. Not petty pants. You know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it was a step-in, so it was short, because you couldn't have something that came down too low. You can see it when the skirt rides up a little bit. So it was a shorter version of that. And you see that in Downton Abbey and other things that I've
So
seen.
this was before the Gilded Years.
This was after.
After.
Yes, this was after. The Gilded Age, and again, that's another debatable thing, but most people, I would say, most historians would say that the Gilded Age really ended right around World War I. So it wouldn't have gone into the 20s, but there's been a lot of debate that it ended in 1901, and then some people say later. So I always kind of use World War I to 1914 as a part of that, the ending of that. Speaking of it, if you love the Gilded Age, I do one on the Gilded Age, but also there's a wonderful podcast called The Gilded Gentleman. His name is Carl Raymond, and I listen to a lot of podcasts because I travel all the time to do these. And he's a tour guide in New York, and he talks all about not just, oh my goodness, the buildings, the food, the drink, everything about the Gilded Age in New York, and I think it's fascinating. There's also, if you watch the Gilded Age show on HBO, which was written by Julian Fellows, who wrote Downton Abbey. Have you seen it? There was a podcast that went with that. So just to give you a little, it's great. Just saying. So glad you mentioned that. Okay, so the 20s, now we're looking at a freedom. The women can vote, at least over here. And some of them cut their hair, not all, but they cut it into the bob. And then you're seeing just that loose garçon kind of cut. That brings us to, not that she's dressed like that right here, because these are her gowns, but Grace Coolidge, who was First Lady from 23 to 29, so she fits right in this period. And she loved glamorous evening gowns, so just loved them. And she didn't do interviews, which is interesting. She did no interviews, but she was very, kind and outgoing to people who visited at the White House. She endeared herself to the American people by her untiring courtesy, modesty, and example of the best admired qualities of American womanhood. For what that's worth today, right? I don't know what it is anymore, we don't know. We don't know where we're at. All right. But I just love her style. She just had such poise. Beautiful. She looked like she was just a very classic dresser, like nothing over the top. And then the 30s, the skirt hem went down again. Now we're back at calf level, and we're looking at that slim line again. So it came back to that feminine figure with the waist line, and I don't know how happy women were about that, but I think it's a glamorous time period looking from afar. What I love is the supper club dresses that they had, and you know how every period has a body part, not for the men, for the women, that is shown off. And in this case, instead of the legs from the 20s, it was the back. A lot of dresses had open backs or very low cut backs, which I think is what's more glamorous than a low cut evening dress with pearls going down the back. You know what I mean? Think of Audrey Hepburn. That was early 60s, but still, you know what I mean. So in the 30s, again, because we have to go through all the decades, I'm only just highlighting certain things, but the small print was popular too in the early 30s, and you're seeing that long length. But by the end of the 30s, now we're going into World War II, look at the difference. Now we're looking at the padded shoulders, although Elsa Schiaparelli came out with padded shoulders earlier, like I think it was like 34 in her collection, but we didn't see them as much yet. And we will by the 39 into the World War II time period, and of course the shorter skirts, because of course there were restrictions. There's restrictions in fabric and all kinds of things like nylon and silk and rubber, leather, needed for the war effort. And that's where Eleanor comes in. Now, I told you in the beginning that this was about women who were icons and those who weren't. Where does she fall? Not really a fashion icon, I wouldn't say. However, she was something else. She was a trusted advisor to FDR, put up with a lot, we won't get into it, but she was a human rights activist, and FDR was elected to a fourth term, but he didn't survive it. She wasn't considered fashionable, but you know what's cool? She was the first lady to do radio broadcasts. And she really cared about people, and I think women's rights and all of that as well, and smart women. And, how could you not love her? I mean, that dress on the right, she needed somebody to fit that to her. We needed Elizabeth for that dress. But
you know what? She also was one of the first ladies to invite Mary McLeod Bethune to the White House, which was a shocker to the whole society when she invited her.
Good for her. Yes. I love a gutsy lady like that. She didn't worry about what people thought of her. She just did what she thought was the right thing. And that, I give her total kudos for that. Fashion, be you know what. You know what I mean? Okay. All right, just a real quick thing about the restrictions, of course, war restrictions. Now, the sweep of the skirt is the width, the hem, how wide it is. And that was restricted. And so you had a much narrower skirt, and there were many other restrictions. Like you weren't supposed to have patch pockets, only like single-breasted instead of double, all of that kind of thing. So in order for things not to be boring, whoever's designing or making a dress or a suit or whatever, better be inventive, because in order to make it look interesting, they'd have to do things without using extra fabric, because it was against the regulations. So just check out this suit. I'm going to make it bigger. Okay, can you see the little pieces of fabric that just look like stripes, but it's the same fabric? Where do you see the back? Look at the back. This is what I'm talking about. You could be inventive without using a ton of fabric. Many women, and there's so much to this, again, I have to keep it short, but many women would take their husband's suits or other garments because they were at war, take some of that fabric and add it to something they're making, like a dress, just for the contrasting color, maybe contrasting fabric. And then one other thing I'll say about wartime, what they do without their stockings. We know this, come on, you know this. Oh yeah, leg makeup, because they couldn't get their nylons or silk stockings, unless they got lucky. Maybe somebody came home from the war and brought them a pair. And then some of them would draw the line and seam up the back. Yeah, to make it look like the real thing. And they'd even draw the seams, like there were seams back here, and they'd even draw that sometimes to make it look real. So, very cool. All right. And then we have the new look. We're getting there, almost there. This is my favorite period in the 20th century, when Christian Dior came out with his Carole line in the spring of 1947, and he was tired of seeing women in the same old suits with the padded shoulders. So he took away the pads, softened the shoulder, brought the waistline back, welcomed back tight girdles, and also lengthened the skirt. Now, eventually the skirt would not just be wide, up to 25 yards of fabric, but also could be very narrow, but the same length. So that's like a wiggle skirt, what they call it today, or wiggle dress, which, like the hobble skirt, but not as long. So very narrow at the bottom, so a woman would have to wiggle to walk. If you think of Marilyn Monroe in the 50s, it's like that. So it really brought the femininity back. So there's your narrow, as opposed to the one on the right, which is very wide. And that peplum was very popular when this style first came out. But like it says, up to 25 yards of fabric could be used in those full skirts. Check it out. There's your support team underneath your garments. And, think about the war and think about the sweater girls of the 40s and the pinups. And how they had the tight sweaters and then the pointy. I always call them bullet bras or torpedo bras, but that structure was still important in the 50s because you're bringing back the breasts, really. They're going to show again. And there you go with your bras, and then you have your very tightly cinched waist, and then the girdle will come over. So it was a long line girdle. And it would cover again the thighs to a certain extent because those tight skirts really needed, anything would show that wasn't completely. Everybody has some kind of lumps and bumps, right? That we have to kind of flatten those babies down.
And New Haven was known for the undergarments.
Oh, yeah.
Who? Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
A huge factory that
Yes.
makes women's undergarments.
And what was the name of
Strauss Adler.
Oh, Strauss Adler. Okay, yeah. How cool is that? Right here.
I'm not even a woman, I know that.
Oh! If you live here, you have to know that, right?
Actually, my aunt worked there.
Oh, is that right?
And a lot of women work there and do it after wartime, as they call it.
Yes. Like Rosie.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, wow. Wow. Yeah, this time, the reason I'm so nostalgic for it is because I was born in 57. So I was born, not to go through that, but I remember my mother's clothing from when I was a young girl. Whenever they'd have a party, she would always dress in those cool fashions. So that's what I remember. I didn't know any different, or I would have saved them. Who knew I was going to be doing this? I wish I had some of those dresses. She didn't have a lot, but what she had was really nice. Anyway, but that brings us to Mamie. Mamie is going to fit right into this period. And what color did she love? Pink. Not only in her clothing, but accessories. She even had pink lipstick cases. So she was really into the color. And of course, the Mamie bangs were all the rage. My two next door neighbors had straight hair, unlike me, so they had the Mamie bangs, real short. And that's what I think of. But her dresses were pink, you can see the bags matching were. She said she rejected old lady clothes and behavior and wore strapless dresses, evening dresses, with full skirts like those favored by high school seniors for prom. I don't think she looks that daring, but I'm not going to say anything. I mean, God bless her. I like the pink on her. And there she is with her two inauguration gowns, and they both look like they're light pink. Even the gloves, I believe, and the accessories. So, I don't know that I'd call her a fashion icon, would you? No. But she looked nice. Always. Always.
They said she was very kind.
Oh yes, I've heard good things about Mamie. Definitely.
Yeah?
I love it. I love that back piece on her dress on the right, too. Lovely. And then, of course, going into the 60s, we still have some remainder of the looks from the 50s. It's not like a New Year's Day it changes over, it just doesn't work that way. So we go into the early 60s. If you watched Mad Men, that series, that's supposed to be 1960 to 69. That covers, it's fabulous. Oh, if you get a chance to see it. But they start out with Betty Draper with her 50s wider skirts. But the youthquake is coming out of London. And this makes me smile because my sisters were of age. They were teenagers. I was a young kid, but I loved everything they wore. The white go-go boots that Courage came out with. And I had a fake pair of those, but I was still thrilled to have them. But you're going to see a whole new look for young people coming out of London. And the shorter skirts are emerging, and they will become micro minis eventually. So, of course, not that she's in a micro mini, but here's our fashion icon for sure, and that's Miss Jackie Kennedy, Mrs. Jackie Kennedy. And, of course, she had only a short-lived reign as First Lady because of the assassination of her husband, Jack. So, but this lady was very popular in everything that she wore. People copied her. Everybody wanted to emulate. All the women wanted to emulate her. My mother even wore, I remember in the early 60s, the scarves but tied at under the chin like she did. And that was very, very popular.
They had an exhibit at the Harvard Kennedy Library, the business school, of Jacqueline Kennedy's clothes.
I saw it.
And they gave a lecture, and they said that Ola Cassini, who designed all of her clothes, said that the look for her was going to be, the overall theme was Egyptian princess. And because he had formerly worked in Hollywood and knew what would look good in front of the cameras, that really helped to create clothes that would look really good that she wore for all the cameras that we saw.
That's right. She's talking about Ola Cassini, who designed most of her clothes. You're going to see a little film clip about him in a book that's about his writings. You're going to see that in a minute. Thank you for that. You see that 3/4 length sleeve as well, and that was very popular with the long gloves. So you're going to see a couple of examples of that when we finish.
Also with the 3/4 length, women had started to drive cars.
Yeah.
And so that helped.
It did.
Yes.
It got out of the way so they could drive.
Right.
They didn't have all these sleeves. That's exactly right. I loved her. Oh, the pillbox hats. Who did pillbox hats for her? You know. Who did that? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm glad you did. I love that look. No, Halston designed those hats for her. Halston. Pillbox hats, yep. This is the infamous pink suit which she wore when her husband was assassinated. And she sent the bloodstained suit as is and some of the accessories to the National Archives. So she wanted people to remember what they did, you know what I mean, what had happened to her husband. It's very sad, very sad. Ugh. Okay, this is this little video I mentioned.
1,000 Days of Magic. Dressing Jacqueline Kennedy for the White House is a personal memoir by Ole Cassina. There are moments in history where events converge to create something rare and special. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy's selection of Ole Cassini as her personal couturier to design her official wardrobe was one of those moments. Not only in fashion history, but in political history as well. Ole Cassini created a look for Jacqueline Kennedy which became known as the Jackie look. As First Lady, Jackie became one of the best-dressed women in the world and a memorable and glamorous icon of the Kennedy era. Together, they created magic. During the 1,000 days of the Kennedy administration, Ole Cassini signed over 300 outfits for Jackie: coats, dresses, evening gowns, suits, and daywear. As the First Lady's Secretary of Style, Ole coordinated every aspect of her wardrobe, from shoes and hats to gloves and handbags. As Ole said, I dressed her as a star in a major film, which she was, the most influential and fashionable First Lady of all. And as Jackie graciously stated, Ole dressed me for the part. Ole Cassini offers a fascinating, insightful, and comprehensive view of his role as Jackie's personal couturier. His international background allowed him to fit comfortably into the Kennedy political dynasty and offered him unprecedented access to both Jackie and Jack Kennedy as a designer and as a trusted friend. From the details of his long-standing friendship with the Kennedy family to his meeting with the new First Lady-elect in her hospital room just after the birth of her son, John F. Kennedy Jr., to his thoughts on Jackie's fashion imprint and her waist. Cassini's personal and visual recollections and details are far-ranging and important. Within the pages of 1,000 Days of Magic are Cassini's original sketches, notes, fabric swatches, and more than 250 photographs of the First Lady as she tours India, Pakistan, France, England, and Italy, shows off the White House, and hosts state dinners and family gatherings. Both public and private moments are visually illustrated within the pages of the book, capturing the aura and majesty of the 1,000 days of the Kennedy White House, celebrating the elegance and charm of the First Lady, who became one of the most admired and emulated women in the world. This beautiful Victorian history book is essential for anyone interested in an intimate view of one of history's most iconic moments. Ole Cassini is known as an icon of style, and he personifies the American dream in all its hope and glory.
So it's obviously more of a push for his book, but I just love, I did buy it. It's still available. I don't remember what I paid. It wasn't that cheap. I might have gotten a deal on Black Friday or something. I don't know. But it has, what I love is like they said, it has like letters from Jackie to him, thanking him, or asking for details on something he was making. It has swatches. It's fantastic, and so many great pictures. So I'm sure it's still available somewhere on Amazon. Okay, real quickly, the 60s. Remember, we talked about the mini skirts, but there were art movements that also influenced fashion. One of them was op art, optical illusion, and the other one was pop art. So think about the soup cans from Andy Warhol. And that's a paper dress that you could get. Very short-lived fad. If you sent 3 labels of Campbell's soup and $1, you too could have one of those dresses. And not many of them survived, considering they weren't made out of something, they weren't paper like a paper towel, but they could still, be destroyed a little easier than an actual woven fabric. And then we had the push towards longer hems, because skirts I'm going to get a little bit graphic here, but they got so short that eventually they had to put a crotch in it and call it hot pants, because there's no other way. It couldn't get any shorter. So the hot pants was a short-lived thing too. But then they tried to push the midi skirt, which was calf length. We weren't ready for that in the 70s. That came big in the 80s, but not the 70s. But the maxi did. So think about the gunny sacks dresses that came in, and the prairie dresses. long skirts. And then we're also going to be looking at that sort of that hippie kind of era at the end of the 60s and into the early 70s. All of that. That worked with the long dresses and skirts. And I know I wore to my proms, I wore full-length dresses. And that brings us to the 80s and Nancy Reagan. Nancy Reagan had some elegant style. I read that she liked her, 4-digit gowns, but they're probably 5 digits now in price. But she did have nice style. I wouldn't call her a fashion icon. I wouldn't. But I liked her in everything she wore. I thought she looked beautiful, and I love that she wore red so well.
What is the thing with her and the shoes?
Oh,
She had
she loved
shoes,
her
and she
shoes.
had ordered, was it like 600 pairs?
She had a lot of shoes, yeah. She liked spending money on clothing and accessories. Exactly. I don't think she was criticized that much. This was the 80s. People were spending money like crazy anyway.
It seems that, like, she took a lot of I'm going to say,
Abuse.
verbal abuse
Yeah.
from the press for all the dresses that she wore and how
She
much
was-
she paid for.
right.
As opposed to Jackie Kennedy, who's got her own designer, basically.
Yes.
Nobody gives a squat about that, right?
No, because I think that if they were
Not that I'm a
considered...
Nancy Reagan fan per se, but I'm just saying.
Oh, no, I
it
understand,
just
yeah.
seems like
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I didn't realize that she was criticized that much, but apparently you're saying she was because she spent.
She wasn't liked.
She wasn't liked either. She's saying,
She had a $1 million allowance a year from Mr. Joe Kennedy to pay for her clothes. Jackie
oh,
did.
okay, I didn't know that about her. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Jackie was criticized because they were Camelot. You know what I mean?
different era, right?
It was a different, yeah, I think that's what it was.
The golden
They
age.
just fell in love with that couple, beautiful couple. Yeah. And he was so young compared to the presidents we had, yeah.
He was brilliant.
Yeah. Yep.
He was.
And there she is with her inauguration gown.
The only ugly dress she ever wore was her wedding gown.
You didn't like Jackie's wedding gown?
Oh, it was atrocious.
Oh, I loved it.
Oh my God, with those circles of
Oh, I know, but I love the a little off the shoulder.
That was all right, but the skirt was awful. Well, you know what happened?
She did not like that gown.
Well, you know what happened was a week before her wedding, her gown was destroyed in a fire.
Oh.
And her housekeeper or maid or whatever.
So they had to hurry
She
up.
immediately got to work and sewed her a wedding gown.
Yeah, I liked it. Isn't that funny? You're funny. Hey, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Okay, real quick, Barbara Bush. So graduated from Yale, going to school at Yale, like George. And she was quoted as everybody's grandmother. Friendly and forthright in her manner. And she promoted literacy while George was still vice president. They had 6 children. This I didn't know until I read more about her. But one died of leukemia at less than 4 years old. But people liked her because she was, I don't know, I think the whole thing with the triple pearl necklace and just, maternal, that kind of maternal. She didn't dye her hair, so she was sort of, just who she was. And I think people appreciated that about her.
She was mom.
She was mom. Yep.
Didn't she have a daughter that was institutionalized also?
That was Kennedy.
That was Kennedy.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because, I don't remember hearing that about Barbara, but...
No.
And there she is. I mean, if that's not a typical 80s evening dress on the right, what is, right? It's great. There she is with her pearls. But she always looked elegant, didn't she? Yes. And she had a beautiful white hair. I mean, she could totally get away with that, I think. I
They
thought
said she was a very kind.
kind, yeah. Yeah, well liked. And then there's Hillary. Remember the headbands and the pantsuits? We're going to see a little bit of that. But smart woman, can't take that away from her. So she met Bill at Yale. She went to Wellesley as an undergrad, and she was the first student to make the commencement speech. That's pretty big. She, of course, U.S. Senator, Secretary of State, and presidential nominee.
They went to law school less than a mile away from here together.
Yeah, right down the street, right?
Yep, literally.
Yep. How do you like that Christmas sweater? I wouldn't call her a fashion icon. I wouldn't. I don't really even like the inauguration dress from her. It's not that it's a bad dress. I just don't see her in that.
Well, she underwent a lot of changes as his term went on.
Yes, she did.
And then, of
she
course,
got with the program, so to speak.
But I have to admire her because what he went through with that girl, what was her name? Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah,
And she
kept
kept her head up.
Yeah, she did.
Which was great.
Well, she had ambitions of her own too, though.
But I got to tell you this. I was in a restaurant in New York with friends, and in the corner, was Monica Lewinsky and a bunch of people. We didn't know who they were. But she was pointed out to me. And every 5 minutes, this was in the middle of all of that, every 5 minutes she would get up and walk across the restaurant, pretending to go to the ladies' room.
Oh, she just wanted to be noticed?
At least 10 times in an hour.
Oh, yeah.
It was sickening.
Yeah. Oh,
And
well.
she was ugly. And she had a
She's not a fan.
and she had a rear end on her like this.
Oh,
Oh,
good old Bill.
yeah.
Yes.
Who was the first lady to wear pants in public?
Oh, boy. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can answer that. Let's think about the decades. I would say, I don't know if Jackie did. I would think it would have been her. Because she had to wear a casual outfit sometimes, and she had the, when they went around the cave and stuff. Yeah, I would say probably her. All I can think of is Hillary with her pantsuits. But
Right, that's what I was asking.
yeah, but I think Jackie, probably not, for formal, anything formal, but for, for casual occasions. She would, yeah. Yes. Oh, Eleanor! How could I forget about Eleanor? Eleanor, she was, yes. And then we had I don't know about Teddy's daughter there, the rebellious one, but she might have won the Poiret's Turkish trousers too. Yeah, that's so funny. Good question. There she is with headband in her younger years, and there she is on the right in the other inauguration dress with Clinton. They don't look too unhappy there. And then almost there, I loved Michelle Obama's style. Do you know she was criticized for showing her arms? Give me a break. She had great arms. Why shouldn't she show them? And you know what I loved? I had read that she wasn't all about spending big bucks on fashion. She even went to Target. And I just think she's awesome. I'm sorry, I just love her. And I love that red dress and that red coat.
It was nice.
Stunning. Nothing bad to say about that woman. Okay, this is the end. Well, almost the end. That didn't sound good. This is the end. God forbid. God forbid. But anyway, I love Melania's blue suit because look at the next picture. The blue gloves, the 3/4 sleeves, and the light blue. I love that, and it reminds me of Jackie's in a different style. But I just love that.
What happened to, oh God, the worst looking inauguration gown I ever saw was Obama's wife.
That was Michelle Obama.
Oh, Michelle? Well, you're not talking about that white one, are you?
She wore a yellow, all ruffled,
Oh, I don't remember that.
to the inauguration ball, and people
Oh.
were laughing.
It was one.
It wasn't that one on the left?
The one on the left.
Yeah, I don't like that either, but I love the one on the right.
Well,
And that was Jason Wu. That put him on the map. Yeah.
The one on the left, she looked so ridiculous. She's a big woman.
Oh, I don't think she looks bad in it. But I like the red better.
Me too.
Okay. Last but not least, before the Melania again, is Jill. And I'll just go through this quick. She, I don't think she's a style icon. I don't see anything spectacular, but I think some of the things, she always looked okay. She didn't look awful. I heard somebody say the last week when I did this presentation, say that she could look kind of sloppy sometimes, but I don't know. I love the blue. Again, we have blue inauguration. And do you know that this dress and coat, those are all the state flowers embroidered on there? Now that's beautiful. You got to give her that. Yep.
I mean,
But
she was the first lady to continue working.
she was working. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You got to give her that too. She's a professor, right? Yeah. And I think she's attractive anyway. But I think she had some cool outfits. I've seen several of her outfits that were kind of modern looking and cool. Look at them as young people. Isn't that funny? She was kind of a bohemian. I love it. And then here we are. We don't know where we're going. I have no words. I have no words. All right. We're ending the show. I will go through the clothing and accessories fairly quickly so you don't have to sit here for much longer. But there was so much to go through. So I will show you what I have. You can come up and see it if you wish. And then I'll take questions or any comments. I also have, I couldn't fit them on the tables, but I have cards and flyers with my info on it. I have a free newsletter that comes out every month. So if you sign and put your email on the clipboard, I will send you a free newsletter which tells you where I'm going to be. And I do a lot of them in Connecticut. And what the topic will be. So that's up to you. But okay, I'm over here. This is the oldest bonnet I have. This is from 1860s. And it's silk and silk shatters. So you're seeing it not in its best shape, but I have that. I have two that I think are 1880s up here. Wow. And I want you to be able to see them closer, but I can't spend too much time, I know. This one is incredible. These hats are beautiful, these bonnets. And then we move right to the 1930s, a late 30s hat, which is fading a little bit from, it must have been in the sun a lot. And then I am wearing a 50s hat. I love this headband style. You know why? Because you don't need a hat pin, it stays on your head. And this is a combination of velvet, net, and silk satin. Even the inside is beautiful. And this one, look at this velvet one. And look at the inside of that.
Wow.
So be sure to come up and make sure you see some of these beautiful hats up close. And then I have some boots, some walking boots. You can see these. These are actually an olive green. I got these at an auction in Bellows Falls, Vermont last summer. Beautiful condition. And these are a flatter version, probably early 20th century.
They're so narrow.
They're
so narrow.
I know. I don't know how they got their feet, because not everybody had narrow feet. The 20s, the 1920s, it was purposely they were made narrow. They wanted people's feet, I guess, to look smaller. But some of the poor women looked like Minnie Mouse. You know how her feet were always coming out of her shoes. They're very narrow. And then I did a couple of 50s, late 40s, early 50s, gold leather for First Lady. And then this is a really special thing from the 50s. This is called a springulator. You know how when you wear a sandal with a heel, how sometimes your foot goes too far forward and falls over? This technology of the time, if you can see that's the space between...
It had a spring in it.
It had a spring, so the woman's foot would go in, and the springulator would spring back and keep her foot in place. Plus it has an etched heel, and it usually came with other heels, like plain heels that you could switch over with a cobbler. And then I have spats. Oh, this hat. This reminds me, I love this hat. This is a cute little, my mother used to call this color Logan green. This is from the early 60s. Early 60s, yep. I have spats, also known as spatterdashes. These were worn over shoes or boots. It protected the bottom part of the trouser, pants, and the shoes. And women wore them too, for the same reason. These are women's from Macy's, RH Macy's. And then I have men's here too. I have 3 feather fans in different colors you can come and see. Just don't do that thing across the neck because somebody's going to be nervous. I have a very beautiful mesh bag from the 20s. Incredible, beautiful. Come see it. It has what look like blue, almost look like blue sapphires on the clasp, and a little tassel. I also have a compact, an Art Deco compact. You can come and see that. I got that on eBay. And some buckles from the 1920s or 30s. All rhinestones. Yep. And then my bags, and then we'll just do the clothes quickly. This is a 1930s Whiting and Davis. So again, I was thinking of first ladies when I picked all of these out. 1930s. And then I have a 1940s, beautiful silk velvet. 40s bags are pretty easy to see because they have this wide strap and a lot of times loose size details, either the clasp or some other detail there. And this is from the 50s. These bags were very popular. You could see what was inside, so don't put anything you don't want anybody to see. You can fit a cell phone in here, though. So there's that. And then this bag was given to me by one of my attendees. This evening bag is to die for. Look at this. It's heavy. I think it was either 50s or early 60s, but I don't think it's later than the 50s, personally. It's got all this filigree at the top and the silk satin on the inside. Incredible. And you know what's great about vintage bags? They usually come with something in them. This particular one has a mirror. Some of them have combs. Some of them have compacts, and some of them have little purses that are attached to them by a little cord on the inside. And then, so I think I've got everything there. So let's do this real quick. You saw the bodice over here. You can come up. You saw this. You saw the dress that's an accordion. So I'm just going to put that aside for now. This is a Jackie Kennedy type suit right here with the low green. I've worn this before with that hat that I just showed you. And I put a beautiful brooch on it. It doesn't have a lace. It looks like it's handmade to me. It looks like it's handmade. But isn't that a beauty? Can you imagine with the brown of the yes, it's wool. Isn't that pretty?
Very pretty.
Yep, early 60s. And then I'm going back to the 40s for a second. I'm going backwards. But this is a 40s crepe dress with all of the beading and sequins which was available during the war and easier to come by. So a plain black dress could be decorated with beads. And this is, I think it's a 40s nightgown. Woo! Isn't that cool? Gorgeous?
Gorgeous.
So I can see a first lady in that.
So it's got the little dusters to match it.
Yes, I think I do have something like that. I do. This is the 30s. Now this had some kind of great sleeves and neck detail, which was taken off and probably saved for another garment. But this is a 30s bias cut piece. Bias cut is cut on the diagonal so that it gives it a stretch, a little bit of a natural stretch. And you can see all the panels on that. Can you imagine that this is almost 100 years old?
Wow. I don't know why anybody.
Incredible. Here's another 30s piece. I'm going to have to take it off the hanger because even though it's light, it's starting to split. But look at the colors in that. Isn't that gorgeous? (1930s). I took it to a dry cleaner because I wanted to get the stains out of the bottom, and that didn't work. Plus, the beads got ruined; they're starting to fall off. But I still love it, and I still bring it. Look at that vibrant color. They're beautiful. Okay, 2 20s pieces. I don't want to get too rough with these. I'm trying to be careful. But there we go. Whoops. I would bring my rack, but it's so unwieldy to carry with everything else I have to carry it's just harder when they're on, I have to pick them up. Look at this 20s piece. Now, yes. Look at the diamond Tay. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. This dress, the next two I'm going to show you, and about 9 others came to me 2 summers ago when my niece was at a yard sale. And the woman selling all of these 20s dresses and 1 or 2 30s dresses, they came from her mother. And she wanted them to go to a good home who would appreciate them and take care of them. And my niece said, my aunt, she gave the whole 12 dresses, 11 to 12 dresses to my niece for $5. So you never know. Those of you looking, don't poo-poo the yard sales. This is a winter one. Velvet with embroidery, and I hope that's not mouse fur. You know that the 20s, it's always, this is where the action is down here. Isn't that pretty? So she took very good care of them. And this is one I always bring when I do the Golden Age of Hollywood, because look at this. Silk velvet. There's my girl who likes to feel it.
Oh, yes. You can't even get this ever.
Oh, look at
Look at that.
You can't get it.
That would be beautiful.
Yes. You can't get it.
Gorgeous.
Do you know who designed that?
I don't. Doesn't have
That's
a label.
amazing.
Isn't that a beauty?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, a few more and we're done. I've worn this to well, more than once, but I wore it to one of my kids' weddings.
Oh, look at
This
that.
is 40s.
That's beautiful.
It's black crepe. Again, they could do the beading to make it interesting. This is all sequins. I've worn it. There's nothing wrong with it. There's not anything wrong with it. 1940s. And this is a jacket that I brought to illustrate how to be interesting and make it different. There's just a little bit of color difference in the fabric.
Yes.
Yes, it is gabardine. Yep.
You can't even get gabardine today.
Can't get anything anymore that's any good.
I love that.
It's ombre.
I love that. Oh, Nancy.
All sequins, sweater underneath, and then the chiffon inside. How about that?
Gorgeous.
Nothing wrong with it.
I love
It's been around for all this time.
Today you can't find it.
Young people, I would wear it too. I would wear it.
That's
as a
gorgeous.
jeans
We've never
or-
found that anywhere.
Isn't that a beauty?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Joe Rowe Imports. What about this?
Whoa.
Cashmere. I feel like a Seinfeld with a link. With the red dot. I just want the cashmere. All right. Pearl buttons, mink collar, and look at that clasp. It's very heavy. And a lace overlay inside.
A what?
A lace overlay.
Oh, yeah.
See?
Yeah?
That was typical 50s. And talk about lingerie, Betty Draper or the marvelous Mrs. Maisel would have worn this.
Cool.
Puff sleeves, over robe there. Isn't that beautiful? And there's your lace overlay again. Now listen, I've tried to wear vintage stuff. We're so, I shouldn't say that, but I'm so used to going to bed really comfortable. I bought a vintage nightgown. I never tried wearing this, but I bought a vintage nightgown, very cute from the 60s. But it was all synthetic. So, what? You know, and then the lace underneath my arms was pricking at my, but it looked so cute, I was so mad. 3 more dresses, and then we're done. Look at this piece I bought in a thrift store for $18.
Wow.
It's a guy who cleans out houses in Troy, New Hampshire.
What's it made out of?
The sequins. This has like a,
Oh my God.
this has like a silk or satin ribbon.
And this is worn today.
I want it.
I bet you
I want it for cocktail culture. Yeah, I love it.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that pretty?
Yes.
$18. Because that's how he sells. He sells everything from people's houses. And then these two, well, there's three. Okay. Word to the wise, ladies. If there's a side zipper, don't ever get into it if you're not sure you can get out. Because it's like prison. I wore it to my nephew's wedding years ago. It fit then. Then I tried it on again, maybe a few years later. I was all elbows trying to get out of it. You can't get out. You can't. I did.
Oh, it's really
Look at that.
Look at the bottom.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very different.
Yes.
Yes, isn't it?
Amazing.
Yes.
Oh, and look at the
What,
back.
where do you see the back?
I see, it's beautiful.
Okay.
See that?
Yeah. Cool.
Wow.
Look at the back, folks. Same print, different fabric. Isn't it beautiful?
Gorgeous. Absolutely
I
gorgeous.
can't believe I didn't do this in this dress. And what happened to it. Another Seinfeld reference. I did. Crazy. I did. But then I couldn't get out of it.
Oh my God, look how that's
But
made.
there's no damage. Even with my abuse. Isn't that pretty?
Beautiful.
Yeah, beautifully made. And then two more, and I'll let you out of here. Look at this piece. I've worn this to weddings as well. Nothing wrong with it.
Oh.
Brocade, yeah. Look at the sides. Both sides. Oh, you people, it's so much fun to impress.
I bet you when you wear these things, people come up to you and start, wait.
Well, thank you for saying that. This was one of my stepkids' weddings. So my husband's ex-wife, who never says boo to a goose, doesn't talk much, very introverted, she came up to me when I had this on for one of the weddings. There were 6 weddings I had to go to, but that's okay. I had this on. She looked at me. All she said was one word: fabulous. That's all I needed to hear. Last but not least is this. Think about Navy Eisenhower.
Oh my goodness.
This cummerbund style is very basic. Isn't that nice?
Oh,
It's got the built-in petticoat and all that.
Yes.
So on that note, I thank you all. I'm so sorry I couldn't